Hello everyone. This time around I want to tackle a little subject called regular expressions. Regular expressions are a little bit different than what we've been talking about because they themselves are not actually a part of JavaScript. Instead, regular expressions are sort of a sublanguage, you might say, that's actually present in a great many different programming languages. So more or less what we're going to do here is we're going to learn a little bit about regular expressions themselves, but then most importantly to see how regular expressions can actually be used in JavaScript. We're going to go through a number of different iterations with this example. Let's start off first of all by putting a set of script tags in the body and just creating a regular expression. Regular expressions can be used as literals or can actually be stored in variables, and whenever you write a regular expression you always do so by putting in a set of / characters where the actual regular expression itself will be contained inside those characters. So for example, if I put in /dog/, what this is the regular expression that has the letters dog in it, dog. What regular expressions are actually going to allow us to do is to examine a string to see if that string conforms to a known pattern. And what the regular expressions themselves actually are the pattern. So here, this particular regular expression that I'm putting together would basically check to see that if a string was dog. Now, regular expressions are of course quite a bit more powerful than that. That's something I could have done simply with an equality operator, but we'll get to that here in a minute. For the time being, let's do this. Let me put in an alert. And what I want an alert is the value that I get back from the type of function whenever I give it a regular expression. When I pull that up in my browser, you can see what it comes up and actually says is function. It says that the type of a regular expression is a function. So in JavaScript, regular expressions are considered to be a type of function. Now what we can actually do with regular expressions is regular expressions themselves actually have a function or a method built into them called test. This particular method is actually put there for us automatically by JavaScript, and what we can do is we can pass a string to it. This function then, test, will actually compare the string we pass to it, dog in this case, versus the regular expression that's actually stored here in this variable. It will then return to us true or false depending on whether it's considered to be a match or not. So if I were to say if x.test matches dog, in essence, then I could maybe do a document.writeLine and print out match. I can't seem to get myself to stop typing dog. If I take a look at that in my browser now, you can see that it comes back and tells me yes, indeed, that is a match. Whereas if I check to see if the regular expression dog matched the string test, it comes back and it doesn't say match. So in that case, it found that there was no match. So what I actually want to do with this now is I want to get rid of the script tags that are inside the body, and I instead want to put together a little page here that will let us sort of experiment a little more freely with regular expressions. Essentially what I'm going to want is here inside the body I'm going to want to put in two text fields. One of the text fields will be a place where we can put in a regular expression, which will then have the JavaScript convert into an actual regular expression so that we can then test it. The other text field will be a place where I can put in a string that will be tested against that regular expression, and then I want the script to in essence tell me whether one's a match or another one. It'll be a little bit easier, I think, for us to kind of experiment with the expressions themselves this way. So let's see. Let me put in a form. Here we go. Not actually going to have it submit anywhere. I change that to post for no particular reason. All right. There we go. I will keep the submit button just the way it is. Except I'm going to change it so instead of saying continue, it says check, I guess. We'll check to see if there's a match. All right, here inside the form then, let me put in some input fields. Let me put in an input field for the pattern. There we go. It's going to be a text field called pattern. That's that. And let me also then put in a field for my actual string. I guess I'll just call it string. Let me pull that down. This again is going to be a text field. And there we go. Let me just capitalize this, neaten it up a little bit. Maybe a colon, colon, there we go. Now over on my form, that's what it actually looks like. A place for me to type in my pattern, a place for me to type in a string. I think I'm also then going to throw in one more paragraph down here. This particular paragraph is going to be where I want to have the actual result of the pattern matching displayed. So I think I'm going to give this paragraph the ID of result. And what we'll do is we'll put strings in there, empty strings out of there when we're done with them, whenever we're wanting to show whether something matches or doesn't match. Okay, so with that basic form put together there, up in the head section, let me put in some script tags. And a couple of things that I'm going to want to do throughout the script is I'm going to want to put information into the result paragraph and clear information out of it. So let me go ahead and start by just putting together a couple quick little functions to let me do that. Let me make one called show result, which will be passed let's just say a result. I'll call it R. Like we've done previously, R here is going to be a string, and whenever I call this function and pass it a string, I actually want that string to be inserted into my result paragraph as a text node. So let me start by creating, let's say, well, I've already got a paragraph. Let me just start by retrieving that paragraph, document.getElement by ID, and I'm going to tell it to retrieve the paragraph called result. Right. Then to the paragraph I want to append child, and the actual child I want to append is going to be a new text node. So I'm going to do document.create text node, and I'm just going to do it right here inside the parentheses for the append child function. And what I want inside the text node is the string that was passed to this. So let me just give that a try. Actually, I can't quite give it a try yet. We'll give it a try here in a second. Let me also go ahead and make a function here called clear results. SULTS, there we go. This function I'm going to want to clear out whatever happened to be shown in results before. So kind of like we did when we were talking about form validation, I'm going to put together a while loop. The while loop is going to work with my results paragraph, so let me go ahead and retrieve it the same way I had before. And I'll say while p.hasChild nodes. Okay, that should return true or false. Then p.removeChild, p.firstChild. Hopefully that'll clear everything out for us. So those are just sort of a couple little supporting functions that we're going to want as we go through the rest of this script in order to get it all to work. Okay. Next thing I want to do is I want to set up my form so that whenever I click the submit button, it doesn't actually try to submit anywhere. Instead, what I wanted to do is gather the value from the pattern and the string field and to compare them as regular expression to field. This is something that's going to need to happen after the form has already been loaded by the browser. So I'm going to put this all inside a window.onLoad function. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say window.formsElement0.onSubmit, and I'm going to go ahead and put a new function in there. So whenever we submit our form, this will be the function that actually executes. And the last thing I'm going to want in that function is going to be return false. That way the form never actually tries to submit. Since the form doesn't have an action, submitting the form would actually cause the page to reload, which isn't something that I'm actually going to want. Instead, whenever the form is actually submitted, this is where I'm going to want it to go ahead and actually perform our pattern match. So the first thing I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to retrieve my my two values, my pattern value. So I'm going to make a variable called pattern, and to get that variable, I'm going to do document.forms0.pattern. That's the name of the field. .value. And I'm just going to take that and I'm going to put it here into this variable called pattern so that I don't have to type all of this every time I need to access it. Let me then do basically the exact same thing, except here I'm going to retrieve the string from the form and I'm going to put it into a variable just called string. Right? Now at this point both the pattern and the string are strings. The string being a string is not a problem, but the pattern being a string is. I actually want that pattern to be a regular expression. So I'm going to convert it by doing an eval function call on it, what the eval function is actually going to do is it's going to take the string that's stored there inside pattern, and it's going to execute it as if it were sort of a hard-coded statement here inside the JavaScript. So for example, if here in pattern I put /dog/, for example, right, what it would actually do is it would take that string, and when it evaled it, it would more or less be the same thing as if I had typed eval/dogs/ like that, except it's going to more or less take the value that's going to be treated as an actual expression and actually use the value of a variable to generate that. Hopefully that will work. I think it will. Right? The next thing I'm going to do then is I'm going to want to compare my pattern and my string. So from my pattern I'm going to call test, and I'm going to pass it the string. Now of course if the string matches the pattern, then it'll return true and we'll execute something right here. If it doesn't match the pattern, then we'll execute something else. So before I do either one of those, let me go ahead and clear the results, calling that function that I wrote up here before, clear results, right? And what was the name of my other function? Show results. There we go. If there's a match, then what I'm going to want to do is show results, or was it just result? It's just result. Show result, and what I'm going to want it to actually show is the string match. If there isn't a match, then the string I'm actually going to want it to show is the string no match, just like that. That seemed too easy. Probably won't work. Let's go see. Over in the browser, I'm going to reload. Right? Let me try using our little sample here before. Let me put in a regular expression of dog. Let me compare it against the string dog and hit check. And sure enough, something blew up. Let me go take a look at my errors. Window.forms. Oh, well that's certainly not right. Line 25. I apparently put window.forms in there. Yep, sure enough, that should be document.forms. Let's see how this works now. Let's try again, /dog, compared against the string dog. Ah, it says it's a match. If I compare it against string that, it tells me it's no match. So it looks like everything at that point's working just fine. So very little of that actually has to do with regular expressions themselves, but what all that does generate is this little example, so that we have this nice, convenient, easy way now of being able to try out different patterns versus different strings and see how they actually work without us having to constantly manipulate our source code. This could always be a nice little test program that you can use whenever you're trying out a new regular expression that you've never used before. So with our little example program here ready to go, let's go ahead and start digging in and talking about regular expressions themselves. Regular expressions themselves are made up primarily of things called metacharacters and quantifiers. Metacharacters are essentially special patterns of characters that we can put in that can then match other patterns of characters. Quantifiers generally have to do with how many times particular characters or character groups occur. So through the magic of screencasting here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down and put in a set of JavaScript comments, and inside these comments let me put in a list of some of the meta characters that we're going to see in JavaScript. There we go. With a snap of my fingers, I have all of this filled in for us. These are some of the most commonly used meta characters that we have available to us in JavaScript. Basically what we have here is that anytime in a regular expression we use a period, a single period, that can mean any single character. Anytime we use the pattern \d, that'll match any single digit. \w will match any alphanumeric character, basically any number or letter. \s will match any white space character, so things like new lines or hitting the space bar or tabs. The circumflex, or the housetop a lot of people call it, can match the beginning of the line, and the $ can match the end of the line. So for example, let's go over and take a look at this in our little sample page that we've put together. If I were to, for example, put together a pattern where I put in circumflex ... $, what that pattern would actually mean is that I'm looking for the beginning of the line, followed by any 3 individual characters, followed then by the end of the line. So if I put in a string like wow, right? Hey, what happened? Didn't seem to work. Oh, I know what went wrong. I forgot to put in my slashes. I need to put in // circumflex ... $. Let's see if that matches. Wow. Ah, sure enough, that's a match. The reason it's a match is because we have the beginning of the line followed by any 3 characters followed by the end of the line. If I were to put in a 4th character, then at that point it tells me there is no match. There's too many characters there in essence. If I were to just put in 2 characters, again, no match. But if I put in 3, like mom, right, that would be considered a match. So that's kind of the way that we put together regular expression patterns. The circumflex and the $, the single period, all very, very common. Another common type of pattern I might put in is what if I, for example, wanted to match a 5-digit zip code. What I could do for something like that is I could put in 5\Ds, right? Which means that any 5-digit number that's put down here will be considered a match. If I put in 5 letters, right, that's considered not to be a match. But if I put in 5 numbers, that is a match. So there's a tremendous variety of different patterns that we can potentially put together just using these meta characters and nothing else. How about if I wanted to match something like a date, say a 2-digit month, 2-digit day, 2-digit year? If I wanted to be able to put them in, like let's say 10-10-09, for example, then what I could match for is \D hyphen. You can still use regular characters in these regular expressions where you have places where those characters are supposed to always occur. \D hyphen \D, right? And then that would be considered a match. Whereas if the user put in a single-digit month, for example, that would not be considered a month anymore, or that would not be considered a match anymore. So like I was saying, quite a different variety of ways and different patterns that we can match using nothing but just these meta characters. Lots and lots of fun stuff that we can throw together. Right? Let's see. I guess the next thing we need to talk about then would be things called quantifiers. Right? Just like I did with the meta characters, let me put a list of quantifiers in here for you. There we go. There's a list of the quantifiers that we'll be taking a look at. What we actually have here for these quantifiers is we have the asterisk or the star. The way it will actually work is we will put in some pattern just before it. Whatever pattern comes before the asterisk must then appear in the actual string 0 or more times in order for it to be considered a match. The next character after that is the plus sign. Again, that would follow some type of pattern, and for it to be a match, whatever precedes the plus sign has to appear 1 or more times in the string. The question mark means that its subpattern has to appear 0 or 1 times. We also then have the square braces where we put a number here in place of the letter N, which lets us specify how many times something has to appear. I just realized, did I misspell exactly? I sure did. There we go. I knew that didn't look right. That's what happens when you use magic. After that, we have the parentheses, which lets us actually create subpatterns that could then be followed by any of these other quantifiers. And the very last one we have is the pipe symbol. The pipe symbol is actually sort of an OR operator in regular expressions. It's actually called the alternation quantifier. All right, so the way that we could actually use these things, if we go back over and take a look at our sample page again, so that we can fiddle with some of these. Okay. A minute ago I did a regular expression where we were trying to match a date. Let's do one for a phone number. If we wanted to match a phone number, we could say that a phone number has to have the beginning of the string before it, and it has to have the end of the string after it. What it then maybe would have to be something like 3 digits for the area code, so \D, followed by a hyphen, followed by a 3-digit exchange, \D, hyphen, and then a 4-digit line, \D. That kind of makes a big long mess. But one of the ways that we could use something like our quantifiers is instead of having to repeat the \Ds all these times, what I could do is I could put in a \D once, follow it by maybe a set of curly braces, and say that that preceding character, the \D, has to be repeated 3 times. So I could take that entire long kind of nasty looking regular expression and I could turn it into something quite a bit shorter and simpler looking by doing like that. So now I'm saying I have to have the beginning of the line followed by a digit repeating 3 times, or 3 repeating digits, then a hyphen, then I have to have 3 more digits, then a hyphen, then I have to have 4 more digits. So that should match your sort of standard telephone number. So if I put in 918-595-7000, it tells me that that is a match. But if I leave a digit off, it's not a match. If I leave a digit off in any of the different sections, it's not a match. If I add in a digit that's not supposed to be there, it's not a match. So that matches fairly standard formatted telephone numbers for me, and it lets me use those quantifiers in addition to my meta characters to kind of clean up my patterns and make them look a little bit nicer, a little bit easier to read. Right? Another one that we could use that could be handy would be something like dot plus. Right? The dot, remember, means any character. Right? The plus sign means has to repeat 1 or more times. So in essence, what we're saying here is any character 1 or more times, or essentially any string that's not empty. So if I have an empty string, it's not a match. But if I put together any other string whatsoever, it will be considered a match. Right? So that's actually a way that we could test to see if a string is empty or not, if a string is missing its content in some way. Right? There are many, many others. The different ways that you can put these things together are almost infinite. Let's do one that actually involves some sub-patterns. Let's do this. Let me put in a set of parentheses and put in the word hot. I'm going to follow that with a question mark. Then I'm going to put a space. Then I'm going to put another question mark, and then I'm going to put in the word dogs. Can anybody take a wild guess at what that would actually match? Basically 2 different things. It would match the word dogs, or it would match the word hot dogs, but it wouldn't match anything else. Let me try like that. Okay. The way this one actually works is because I have the parentheses around hot, the entire word hot is going to be treated as sort of one entity, and that one entity is then going to be quantified with this question mark. The question mark means that whatever precedes it, the subpattern that precedes it, hot in this case, has to appear 0 or 1 times. So basically here we're saying that hot can be there or not, one way or the other. The second question mark I have here follows the space, which means that the space can be present or not. And then the word dogs over here is just simply that, dogs, meaning that dogs actually has to be there. So again, like I was saying, a million different things that you can put together using these regular expressions, just kind of depending on exactly what it is that you're hoping to match, what it is that you're hoping to try to put together. All right, hopefully at that point you have the basic idea of how these regular expressions work, and instead of continuing on and digging deeper into them, since they are by themselves a very sort of tremendous subject, let's go and take a look at some of the ways that we might actually use these in JavaScript. So another one of the places where regular expressions are frequently used in JavaScript is actually in form validation, which is hopefully a subject that's fairly fresh in your mind. What I've actually done here to demonstrate this is I've put together a little form like we've done in previous examples. In this particular form, I have a name field where the user needs to type in their name, and I have a birthday field. That birthday field, what I've actually done with it and its label is I have specified a particular pattern that I want the user to actually input their birthday in, basically a 2-digit month followed by a slash, a 2-digit day, a slash, and then a 4-digit year is what I'm actually looking for. So what I could do here is I could actually use regular expressions not only to confirm that something was entered in that field, but to actually make sure that what was entered in that field appears to be in the correct format, that it matches a particular pattern. I've already gone ahead and put together the basics of the validation for this particular page. I've done it in sort of the simplest manner so as to not over confuse this particular example. What I've done is I've set up in the window.onLoad function. So after the document is loaded, what we actually then do is we go and we add a function to the onSubmit behavior for the form. Once that's done, we fall back into our regular validation pattern where I actually create an errors variable. I have an if statement that makes sure the name field isn't blank, an if statement that makes sure the birthday field isn't blank, and then I have my little if else that checks to see whether we should submit the form or not, and if we don't submit the form, I display the errors in a pop-up, which yes, I said wasn't a good idea, but remember, this is just an example, so I was trying to keep it fairly simple. So what I could actually do here is if I not only wanted to confirm that the birthday field wasn't blank, but I also wanted to double check the actual format of what was entered there, was I could add another if statement here for the birthday field. What I would want to do here in this one is I would want to put together a regular expression that described the way that I wanted the birthday to actually be entered. So I could say the beginning of the pattern should be the beginning of the string, and the end of the pattern should be the end of the string. And between the two, what I actually then want is I want a, let's say, 2 digits, right? And then I actually want those 2 digits to be followed by a /. The problem is that / is the same symbol that JavaScript recognizes as the beginning and the end of a regular expression. So whenever I use a / inside a regular expression, I actually have to put a / before it. The / actually takes away the special meaning of this /, so JavaScript doesn't come to sort of a premature end for this regular expression. So what I really have so far now is I say at the beginning of the string, I want to see digits, I want to see 2 of them, and then I want to see a / following that. After that, what I then want is I want 2 more digits, again followed by a /. So I again put // and then following that, what I want is digits. This time I want to see 4 of them, and that will then be followed by the end of the string. So that's more or less the regular expression that I want to test against. And what I can actually do is I can just call the test function for regular expressions right there on the regular expression literal itself and check to see if it's equal to, or if it matches, the value of my birthday field, which I'm just going to copy and paste from my test for blankness just there above. Right. Now the only other problem that we'll have with this right now is that the test function here with our regular expression will return true if it matches. If it matches, then we don't actually want to do anything in particular. We only want to take an action if it doesn't match. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put an exclamation point in front of that saying if there isn't a match, meaning not matched instead of matched, then we want to go ahead and carry out some action. And the action I'm actually going to carry out, of course, is to add something to my errors variable. I'm going to say the birthday field is not formatted correctly. Something like that. All right, so let's go give it a try then. Over in the browser, if I take a look at it, if I try to submit right now, I get 3 error messages, one for name being blank, a second one for birthday being blank, and then a third one where it says the birthday is not formatted correctly. So if I go and I put in a name and I put in a birthday, and let's say that I put it in wrong, 12/12/12 with hyphens between them, I get the error message that says the birthday is not formatted correctly. If I go back and I put it in correctly, 12/12/12/12, yeah, that's my real birthday. In that case, everything works and the form submits, no error message. So regular expressions tend to come in handy anytime you need to see if a string matches a particular pattern, and certainly one of the dominant times that that's the case in JavaScript is when you're doing form validation. So form validation and regular expressions in JavaScript really go together very, very well, and they're probably something you'll use quite a bit.